Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jackie Carr, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am super excited to bring you yet another incredible guest. And this week we have got the lovely Patrick joining us. So Patrick, do you want to tell everyone who you are and where you are in the world?
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me. My name is Patrick Herran. I'm a self-alignment coach. My mission is to help self-improvement seekers who struggle with implementation and consistency and worthiness so that they can finally experience progress every day and, become the best version of themselves. Ideally, they would accomplish more, become more, but also enjoy the process and the present that they're in. I am located in Toronto, Canada. I moved to this country actually 12 years ago. And yeah, it has been quite a journey. I will share, some of that today. I think that my life, somehow turned upside down when I moved. And then I had so many other breakthrough moments and difficult times. And I just can't wait to share it all with you.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We're super excited to share the journey with you as well. So, okay, take us to the start of your journey then. When do you think this sort of healing journey started for you the first time and you kind of realized that something had to change?
Well, there were many, many moments where I got myself in a healing process. The first time would be in 2013. So, that is actually the year I moved to Canada. And I was starting, brand new. I had just quit the university because I used to go to university in my home country. And then, when I got here, I realized that, well, things are not as easy and straightforward as I thought they were. I had to learn English. I had to start over in so many ways. At some point, I had to find myself a job. It wasn't so easy for me to just live off of my parents like I used to. I just do full time university. I used to study political science, and I really enjoyed it. Decided to change directions completely. So I found myself a job, and I honestly it was always in the back of my mind whether I was going to go to university again. Surprisingly, I never did. I never went back. So, and I remember I was having this sort of identity crisis because I said, you know what? I wanted to do what my parents did, become a good professional, get a good job, maybe teach too. And all of a sudden, I felt like I couldn't do that anymore. So that was my first, how can I say, big disappointment early on. And then things, things were very stagnated. I felt like I wasn't moving forward. I was making minimum wage. I liked my job, the people around me. I was working as a quality control supervisor. I actually started with some lower job, which was just a warehouse receiver. And then a year later, I got promoted to quality control supervisor, which was really cool. And I didn't see myself going in any direction that I wanted. I knew I wanted to do meaningful work and change other people's lives, and obviously, get a good high paying job. But I just had no idea where to go next. So, in the middle of that, how can I say, limbo, my dad passed away. So it was the end of 2013. And honestly, I was so heartbroken. My dad has been there the entire time. I was 20 years old at the time. And things were really, really difficult. My family and I, we felt so alone. We didn't know anybody. And, we needed to also survive. My dad was a big provider, and we were all sort of making some money, but not really that much. And it's like I got hit by two more crises all at once. And that was the moment I started to realize that for some reason I thought that I was looking at things before my dad passed away and after. And I said, you know what, I don't if I let things continue this way, I think I'm just going to get depressed. Like somehow, I gained that awareness, which was so helpful. It came at the exact right time. So I remember I was in my living room and I saw a book. There was a book called The Sedona Method. And I've been wanting to read that book for a while. Like my personal development journey had been very short. I think I probably had read few books on spirituality, but then when I had that insight about changing, making some sort of dramatic change, I found that book and I said, you know what, this is the time to start reading. So, and the book takes you through a process filled with like so many useful techniques about releasing your emotions. So, one of the big premises of the book is that most of us grow up repressing our emotions. We experience so many things all the time, like anger, sadness, disappointment, and even joy. Sometimes we deprive ourselves from expressing joy. And I found this concept fascinating. And then I just kept going. And it took me several months, but this book helped me actually overcome the grief of my dad's passing. And I also realized that it changed me a lot. Like I think I did become a different person when you acknowledge that your emotions are there. Some of them are stuck from so many years of never expressing them, right? Or dealing with a difficult past, things that were awful, and then you got over them, but just on the physical realm, you got over them because the situation is finished. But that trauma is still within you. And then you had to let it go. And that was the start of something new that I thought it was, very powerful. I found myself, crying all the time. Like I remember I used to do it always in private, and even today I do it in private. And I just remember, like for example, being at work in doing my job in an aisle and just like stopping for a moment and just crying because I was remembering my dad. And but that was part of the process, like feeling that sadness, letting those tears run down. That was the healing process as well. But it was really powerful, and it really changed everything for me. And now when I see, like, to me, emotional intelligence is such a big part of my life, and I think it's one of those areas of personal development that you can never master. Like you have to be constantly upgrading and trying more techniques. And in fact, I have a thing where I simply look back, like almost every year, I look back and say, okay, what are the awful things that happened that maybe I didn't allow myself to feel, and then I do something about it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, firstly, I'm so sorry that you lost your father. That's so challenging. But I'm glad that you had a catalyst to actually start this work and find something so meaningful from that process. I think that that is absolutely, like, it's wonderful. And I think, like, not only as a society are we bad with emotions, I think it is also painted for men so much worse, that you shouldn't have emotions, that you shouldn't feel and you shouldn't cry, and you shouldn't be doing any of these things, and you should only display certain emotions and not other emotions. So I think actually being able to tap into that and feel those emotions and actually let them out is something that is really, really amazing as well. And it's a gift to be shared with mankind, really. Like, really, really, I deeply believe that. And I guess, like, as you were going on this journey, what what did you have to kind of embrace about yourself, or like accept was changing about who you were as you were kind of going through this process?
think that there were some concepts in this Donam's book that were really difficult to accept. And I remember learning an exercise to release control. And that was something that was so difficult for me. I dealt with perfectionism for so long. And, as time went by, I also realized that my parents were obsessed with control. No, not in the sense of like, I don't think I have my childhood was oppressive in any way, but there was this idea of wanting to control and make everything perfect. And I realized I was doing that for myself. And I remember that in the book, it talks about different wants, right? It calls them wants because they are these desires that are not really healthy for us. And one of them was wanting to control. Another one, which was very interesting that I learned and changed me, was the wanting to finish something. It's almost like we are so anxious about starting a task and wanting to finish it that we rush it and we create that stress. And it's really unhealthy. And we just don't realize it. I was started to see myself shift because I wanted to control things. I wanted things to be perfect. And when I didn't like something, I wanted to just finish it quickly. But it's more about being, in the present moment.
Those are such good insights. I think that that's, yeah, really, really, really great. Because, I mean, perfectionism is something that so many people struggle with. And that level of control, I think control is a really, really interesting one because, in a way, like everybody does want to be in control. They do want that control over their decisions and that control over their life and that control over, the choices that they make and how they show up in the world. And, there's certain things that it is good to have control over. But when control becomes something that controls you, I think that that is when it's that like crossover shift. I like to look at it as like responsibility versus control. And like what you take responsibility for is like one thing, and actually saying like I am responsible for this, the way that I show up in the world, the things that I do, the things that I say, the actions that I take. And then actually like not stepping over into that place of like I have to control everything and everyone around me in order for my life to be good. Because I think like that's the really big thing, isn't it? When you're taking responsibility for something, it's a very individual. Like I can only take responsibility for myself. But when people try and control, they're normally trying to control outside factors like actual time and space and people and, outcomes that have nothing to do with them. And that's when it becomes a really stressful thing because it is literally out of your control. Like there's nothing that you can do about it. But I think for a lot of people, we do live in that space. I know I was a massive control freak as well, and like wanted everything. And it's still something that I have to work on. Like it's still something that I see coming up in me sometimes. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I can recognize it much quicker now. But I think that that is a really, really interesting thing to shift. And it does make your life a lot happier once you actually release that need to control everything around you and can just kind of live in the, oh, well, this is happening and, this is what we're going to do. And it's a very kind of different way of being. So I think that that is, yeah, that's really, really cool, actually. And as you were going through this like shift, were there moments where it was really hard? I know you said obviously losing your dad was really difficult. Were there more moments after that where it was particularly difficult as you were going on this journey?
Well, surprisingly, I found that during those several months, I felt like there was like ongoing progress. Like I knew I was still grieving, but somehow it felt like progressively I was feeling better about myself. Like I was dealing, with the stress so much better. And I was able to, forgive so many things. When someone is gone from your life, someone that you love, you are, you easy, start thinking about scenarios that are impossible, right? As when the other person is gone, you say, well, there are so many things that I did wrong. There were so many things that I should have done different. And honestly, so many times I just think it's so wild because the irony of this whole thing is that I wish my dad could see me today, but at the same time, if he was here, I wouldn't be who I am. So it's very contradictory. But I think that that's the nature of life. And I remember reading a concept, a very particular concept in a different book actually, which the name was so special because I think it explained everything that was going on for me. The term was post-traumatic growth, and I felt like so identified with that because saying, "Wow, this is actually really my story." The book, by the way, was Option B by Sheryl Sandberg, and I said, "Wow, this is really me," and now it all makes sense. So I mean, obviously it's not so easy to like fully embody this concept that some of the pain that we go through has always some positive effect. I think when it comes to personal growth in particular, all the bad things that happen, it's almost that they're asking us to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I massively believe that as well. And I do think that when you go on this journey, it is a decision that you make to have growth from a traumatic experience. Some people have traumatic experiences and they choose to just stay in that experience and not develop and not learn and not um, change themselves as part of that process. And I really identify with what you said around, if your dad was still here, you wouldn't be this person. So it is, contradictory that you'd want him to see you, but also you wouldn't be this person. And I feel similar in a lot of the things that have happened in my life. I look back and I think if that thing had never happened, I wouldn't be the person I am now. I wouldn't have achieved the things that I've achieved now. I wouldn't be sitting here hosting a podcast, speaking to people all over the world if I hadn't gone through my own trauma and, come out the other side of it and done the healing work and learned about the nervous system and, all of these things. And I think it is really challenging because I think that the difficulty with the post-traumatic growth is again that responsibility. Like it puts the responsibility on the person who's gone through the thing to grow. And that is quite challenging for somebody who is sitting in the aftermath of something traumatic because the whole identity of trauma is that you're a victim to it.
Mm. Yeah.
And then trying to
So,
move from a space of being a victim is really hard. Like, of course it is. So there's a lot in there, I think. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that there is a big shift, isn't there, in the way that that kind of fits and sits together. And I guess did that as you were kind of going through this journey and you were sort of learning about these concepts, did you ever kind of feel in that victim mentality of everything that kind of happened to you? And I know you said obviously you had to come out of uni, were there moments where you felt like, oh my gosh, why is this all happening to me?
yes, and I must admit that I even feel like that today sometimes. It's really
Mm.
hard to move away from the victimhood state. And the reason for that is that many things happen outside of our control. And many things appear to be very structural problems. And when you think about your job, right? For example, I'm going to be super honest with you. I complain about my job a lot just because I have way too much responsibility and my pay doesn't really match my responsibilities and performance. And that's something that makes me feel like a victim, right? And I like to make a distinction that hopefully will provide some relief to the people who love self improvement but are not quite to the level of success that they want. And that is that there is victimhood in the sense of the role you are playing in a certain situation. So what I mean by that is that if there is someone or something causing you pain, you are a victim. Your role is that of the victim, which is very different from being a victim in at the mindset level, right? Because you can be in, let's say, an abusive, job relationship, an abusive, uh, love relationship. You are by definition a victim because that's the role, right? There are two sides, and you are here and they are there. But the mindset is going to help you fight back. The mindset is going to help you make that decision, to leave that abusive situation. And that to me is the difference that I see in myself. So, in my mindset, as much as I can, I am not a victim. I know I can change things in my life. At some other times, I also see that it's, how can I say, at the structural level, at the relationships level, I could still say that I am a victim of a thing too. So that doesn't make me powerless, but at the same time, I think it makes me realistic. So to me, and this goes beyond into something bigger, which is the how I approach personal development in some of the methods that I developed myself, which is that to me, obstacles are obstacles. Like a lot of people who are very into this, how can I say, almost hyper masculine, personal development, set a goal, be determined, take action every day, get rejected, get back on track, like that kind of thing. I think that's a philosophy that's very like, masculine energy with that no balance from the feminine energy. And my point is that when you learn from that type of expert or embody those concepts, you forget that there are really real obstacles and limitations in your life. I even like to use the term disadvantages. So, and what you would like to do, what you want to do instead, at least in my perspective, is to acknowledge that you have obstacles, and then you work with them. Instead of saying, well, you know what, everything's an excuse. You say, no, these things are real. How do I get over it?
Oh, absolutely. I think something only becomes an excuse when you actually let it stop you. You know, an excuse is only when you go, "Oh, there's nothing I can do about this." Like, that's when something becomes an excuse. Like, in reality, like, everyone has obstacles and everyone's obstacles are different, and some people have more and some people have less. But everyone will have different obstacles that they're trying to get through. And I think, like, it's always really interesting when you look at from the outside, you can look at somebody's life and think like, oh my gosh, their life is so easy. I'd love to have their life. Like, but actually you never know like what obstacles they've got and what they're trying to deal with and what's going on, and whether it is subconsciously in their brains or in their families, like dynamics, or whatever it is. There's always this idea of like everyone's got a battle that they're fighting. And I think it's only when you actually give into that and just say like, this thing is too much, and because of it I can't do anything, and I can't be the person I want to be, and I can't learn or grow or shift, or like I'm just going to give in to the situation. I think that's the victim mentality, isn't it? Like, rather than, as you said, like you can be a victim of a situation and still have power and still be fighting and still be moving forward and still be doing the things. And like I massively think about this, like going when I was in school, I was massively dyslexic, and I went to school in South Africa, and we didn't really have like that much of a support system. Now, I was really blessed because my sister is like incredible and so academic, and she helped me loads. Like, so she was like my unfair advantage that I had in my corner, which was like so incredible. But like actually looking at the school system, I was at a massive disadvantage. And there was a period of time where I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. Like, I am not academic. I'm never going to be able to do anything with my life. And it was only when I actually took responsibility and was like, well, I need to find a different way. Otherwise, my life is going to be ruined. Like the school's life is going to carry on exactly as it is, and they're not going to care. But actually, my life is going to be like impacted hugely if I don't do something about this. And it's like that moment that I realized that actually, if I give in to these things, the only person that's being hurt is me. Like the only person that's being affected is me, like nobody else. And that was like a real kind of, I guess, shift for me as I was going through this process. And I guess, like, what was your biggest, like, belief change or outlook change as you were kind of going through this process?
I think my biggest shifts, I think it builds off of some of the ideas that you were sharing just now. So you say one of the biggest learnings. I think that one thing that I learned not only during that first encounter with healing, but over the years, trying other modalities, is that it all comes down to what you do with your emotions. Like sometimes there is something that I really want to, I think that is my next step when it comes to personal development, because the way I see it now is that everything that happened in the past, I can somehow feel and release and get over it, right? Now I'm trying to do that more in the present. So, which is interesting because now as things happen, I just release them instantly. That's my one of my biggest changes this year. I've been doing that. So, wow, this is so fascinating because I have something upsets me, even small or big, whatever upsets me. I've developed this discipline of just starting to recognize the emotions and let them go. And now my next step, which is honestly I'm so looking forward to, because that could be like going from ordinary to extraordinary, I guess. And that is that if I manage to do the same work for future things, here's the key. When you do that type of work, knowing that everything that goes wrong, you can feel and let go, you don't have any fears anymore. Like that's the level that I want to be, where you do things that are really uncomfortable or could go really wrong because you know that on the other side, you will be able to let it go.
That's really cool. I really like that concept.
Thank
That's really, really cool. It shifts the dynamic, doesn't it, of how you look at things.
you.
Yeah, I really, really like that concept. And I guess, like, doing it in real time, so releasing emotions in real time and getting really good at not, I guess, not fearing the future, not fearing, well, if something, hard happens, how am I going to be able to deal with it? Like, it must give you a level of freedom that you're actually, as you said, like almost could take you to extraordinary, because actually there's one less thing to fear, and fear is the thing that holds most people back.
That, yeah, you nailed it. And I really love how you put it in terms of freedom. Because freedom should mean a state in which you don't have to, worry or fear so many things. That you can actually do whatever you want. I guess within some like reasonable boundaries, but you could do more or less whatever you want.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
is so empowering.
Yeah, massively. It really is. I think that that's really, really cool. And I guess, like, from everything that you've learned, like you've said, you've gone through all of these different learnings and, your own like self-development, has that shifted like what you think your purpose is in the world and how you help other people?
Completely. That has been another really long journey for me. Because I have my intuition tells me some really hard truth that the the universe doesn't want me to win at anything that is not my life purpose. So to me, that is the big thesis of all my past failures, all of
Oh my
them.
gosh,
And
yeah.
yeah, so basically, a few years later, that was 2016. I realized I was getting so passionate and so invested in personal development that I decided to become a life coach. So that was another long story, a really cool one too, about how I managed to afford for coaching training. But in the end, I signed up to a coaching program in 2017. 1 year later, I had graduated, so I had my certification. And then my next step was to say, so what's really crazy is that my original mission when I started coaching was I want to accomplish two things, basically: help people accomplish their goals, reach their goals, and become the best version of themselves. So those are the two really big and broad goals. And then I said, well, how do I do this? And so once I finished the coaching school, I realized, you know what, I probably should start an online business or some sort of business because I didn't really see myself getting another job, especially in that field. I thought between us, finding a job is super, super difficult. Like it's ridiculously difficult. So I never liked that process. I started and gave up so many times with no results. So I said, well, let's start a business, right? So I started taking so many online courses and then later on coaching programs all about marketing and business. So that really helped me, shift my mission and said, you know what, it looks like, you know, the smartest way to start a business is to choose a narrow niche. You need to choose who your audience is, right? And what specific problem you help them overcome. And that took me through, helped me go through different ideas. And it looks like they were just not working. I remember working really hard, doing all the marketing stuff, talking to a lot of people, posting online, building sales pages, um, doing like free Zoom calls. Like I was doing a lot of work. I'm talking about a 6 years period in which I did all of that, but I also changed ideas. I first started with men with lots of confidence. I was always thinking about myself, like I might niche a few years ago, basically. Then that couldn't make that work, so I quit that, and then I started with um, YouTube creators. I actually had this really cool idea where I could give coaching to these people so that they could, be more consistent and create, better videos. It was really, really fun. I did that for 2 years, but I was also making so little money, working so, so hard. And I said, okay, what's going on? So I had a big insight there saying, well, maybe I have to change to something different. So by then it had been 4 years of failures in business. Then I said, okay, what if I do something wild? I started to realize that a lot of these online courses and coaching programs were really flawed. Like for a long time, I thought I was the problem. But then when I really looked at them deep, dissecting everything, I said, you know what, these courses are actually super flawed. So it's almost like they know it all about marketing, but they don't know anything teaching you about teaching itself and about motivating someone to take all the actions that are necessary. Like they fall flat. They are really bad at that, but they don't know it. And then I came up with this idea, which was really cool, but it was a little weird, which was work with entrepreneurs to take courses, help them finish those courses, like be consistent and implement everything. Because I was getting good at that. So honestly, I thought I found my purpose. Like when it comes to changing my purpose, I said, okay, niche one, niche two, niche three. So, and this idea, I was super passionate about it. Again, it was me like just a few months before, but shockingly, it wasn't working either. Like I was like putting myself out there I started a podcast. I was interviewing experts saying, what do you think makes people successful kind of thing. It was a really cool show. And I was not getting traction. Like people were not coming to find out about my coaching services. And then I was so confused because I said, hey, but I was sure I had nailed it this time. How come it's not working? And then I had this insight. So this is, I think, was my final breakthrough, which happened this year, only 3 to 4 months ago, which was that I said, you know what if choosing a narrow niche which makes you competitive is actually the thing that's keeping me stuck. And I said, what if the experts were actually wrong about that? And what I didn't realize is that for the last 2 years, I was in that like secret journey of finding out through experience that the experts were wrong about so many things. In fact, I got to a point where I simply decided to discard their paradigm of how success works, and I even came up with my own thing. And then that's when things started to shift. And my purpose, this is a crazy. I started wanting to do personal development. Then I went through self confidence, YouTube creators, then entrepreneurship and online courses. And then I said, I just want to go back to personal development. Like that's what I've always wanted to do. But for some reason, I had convinced myself that I wasn't good enough to do that. That if I was to choose something such a wide, area, I would be competing with everybody, right? And that's what the experts tell you. You know what? You don't want to compete with Deepak Chopra. You don't want to compete with, Tony Robbins. And then I said, but the hell with that. I said, this is what I want. And then I went back to the original mission. And I also found out that there were so many things that it almost felt like I was fragmenting myself so much that I was losing important parts of who I was. That's what niching down means to me today. And then I said, and what if I could talk about just anything that I'm passionate about, as long as I tie that to personal development? And this is what's crazy. I want to give you a couple of examples. Now, I am doing a new live stream weekly. I am going to change that a little bit, but basically, I take so many different topics and I just give it my personal development perspective. So now it's not just about coaching. I actually talk about journaling. I created my own journal. I also talk about public speaking. So now my new goal is public speaking, because I know that if I'm successful in that, everything else will happen. The audience, the coaching, the courses, the books, everything will come together. If I'm successful in public speaking, that's my new goal. So I talk about, this is one of my favorite ones. I talk about personal development lessons in pop culture, like video games and movies and series. And I had a really fun time the other day talking about that. I watched the latest Demon Slayer movie, Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. I really love that show. That movie was super epic, and I just decided to draw a story from there and talk about compassion. It was so fun.
I literally love that. I think I completely agree with you in the in the business space. There are people who are very good at niching down, and they do it very well and they really enjoy it and it works for them, and that's incredible. And there are other people who it doesn't work for, and when you have one expert or guru who says that they can fix every single problem in the world of business, that's really scary because it doesn't work like that. Everyone is different, and how people run businesses are different, and what works for people and doesn't work for people is different. I know, being neurodivergent, I absolutely don't want to do one thing. I have 4 different businesses and a podcast because I literally can't do one thing. It doesn't work for me. And I think that's a really important thing in the process as well. Is you have to get to know yourself, and you have to understand what your version of success means, and then create from there. Because if you don't, you can't build a business strategy. I teach people how to build business strategies, and I think as soon as a coach says to you that they've got one strategy that fits everything, run for the hills. That is your sign that they don't know what they're talking about, because it's just not the truth. Everyone's model is going to be different. Everyone's business structure, everyone's marketing, everyone's business is going to be different. That's the whole point. Like if every business was just a copy paste of another business, life would be super easy. Like everyone would have a successful business. Like it just doesn't make sense at all. And I think like the thing that like really made me giggle is when people say like, oh yeah, but if you're, if you're a life coach, you're going to be like competing with Tony Robbins. Like, come on, of course you're not. There's enough people in the world that you're not going to be competing with Tony Robbins. Like, let's just calm down. There are people that could never afford to work with Tony Robbins who will work with you. And like, it's just the way that it is. Like, I think that that is something that is, it just makes me laugh so much when I'm like, no, that's not how it works though. Like, realistically. And like, I always think about it as like a scale. So there will be business coaches and business strategists that are way better than me. Of course, there will be. Like, hello, there's people who have scaled businesses to 7 figures, 8 figures, whatever it is. And then there'll be people who are further behind on the journey than me. And if you said to them, the only coach that you can choose when you're just starting out your tiny business and you know nothing is somebody who's at 8 figures, they would never start that journey because it would be too big a jump for them. The thing that they would be trying to be taught would be too big a jump. Like the level of understanding and comprehension would be too far a step. Like all of those things. So I think that thing that you said about like your avatar or the person you're working with is just you a couple of months ago, like that's why you would never be competing with Tony Robbins, because your clients and his clients are two completely different things, because you and him are two completely different people. Literally, like logic, come
So
on.
true. So
Yeah,
true.
like 100%. I think it's just so funny when people again, they use it as a reason to not start because they're like, oh, there's already too many people who do this thing. And I'm like, if there's a lot of people who do it, it means there's money in it. So get involved.
Sadly.
Get involved. It's what it's all about. So, okay, so I really love this, and I think that is really amazing to like see that journey and see that you've like almost circled back, like done that full circle moment where you're back at the thing that you started with and you've like just found your own way of doing it. Like, I think that that's really, really incredible. And I guess like I want to move on to like practical advice. Like, if you were giving practical advice to somebody who is going through their own like shift, their own healing journey, what do you think like your top pieces of advice would be for somebody as they kind of start out on this journey?
I like that very much. There is one place I always start with any new client, and that is to figure out what I call your lifetime objectives. So I like to say that I don't set goals. I have a whole, philosophy about the goals that are numbered, number of sales, number of followers, number of pounds lost, right? So I don't believe in that. I think they're very stressful, very shameful. And at the end of the day, I think that it makes you necessarily compare yourself to other people. So what I do instead is what I call lifetime objectives. And that means that there are things that you want to experience within your lifetime, not in a year or 3 or 5, in your lifetime. And they also mean that they are coming from you. I think this is the most important part. So when society tells you to get a job and buy a home, you're not going to take those goals. You're going to make your own if that really interests you, you're going to make your own version of those goals, right? And what's really interesting is that most of us start with that.
Yeah.
Cultural expectations. Okay, get a job, get married, get kids, buy a house. Then a lot of us, maybe you're one of them, make what I call the start your own business, shift, right? So you go from that to, well, you know what, freedom, income, freedom, and impact. I like to summarize it like that. And then you follow the guru's path, and you say, oh, tell yourself they're gonna make $1 million, and then if $1 million in a year is how many dollars in one day? Like they break it down like so ridiculously, like nitty gritty. And then how much is that in a month? How much is that in a week? How much is that in a day? Which doesn't make any sense. It's obsession over control, right? So then what happened to me, and what I hope happens to more people, is that you experience what I call the second identity shift. that's the moment where you start choosing goals that come from within. They are experiences that give you happiness and fulfillment, and that they are not a means to an end. You don't get money to experience something else. You don't get married to experience something else. If you want to experience freedom, define it in your own way. If you want to experience unconditional love, define that in your own way, right? Because the thing is that when you set goals that are not yours, it will be a lot harder to pursue them. It will be a lot easier to feel like you're behind the people who haven't. And to me, one, we're gonna get practical, right? To me, a really useful way to uncover these goals is to ask yourself a few questions. Like I love using prompts for everything, and to me, one really important question would be that if you're looking at your goals, do they really come from you, or is something that you got from your parents or your school or even your role models? Your role models could be super badass people, but they are not you. So you have to set your own lifetime objectives. The other thing is that would you want to do this even if it didn't pay you anything, right? Would you want to do this if you could not like be embarrassed about it? Like if shame and embarrassment were out of the table, would you still want to do this? And that's the kind of thing that helps you, peel those layers and find out what you really want to do. And I've gone through actually a very good exercise. I love recommending my own stuff. When I see something that is better for the purpose, I like to recommend it to. And there is this exercise called the 3 most important questions, which was created by Vishen Lakiani, the founder of Mind Valley. And that I literally send that video to my clients when they start with. I tell them, figure them out, print your 3 most important questions, uncover. I like to review it with them to make sure that all is in check, right? That they're not setting goals that are not theirs, and that they're not setting goals that are like it is something to get something, right? For example, if you wanting a high-paying job is wouldn't be part of your lifetime objectives because that supposedly gives you something else like stability or reputation or a good income, which is that's what you're really so that's what you're really after. And then what's really important, the next step, this is where I failed big time because these lifetime objectives is an exercise that I've done 2 years ago. And part of my shift, that big shift from niching down to not doing it anymore, had a lot to do with me reviewing those lifetime objectives. So basically, I did my exercise 2 years ago. Somehow, without really realizing, I wasn't following them. And then when I revisited those goals, I said, okay, so this is a problem. I'm not doing so many of these things. And part of that was that I thought I had to be successful in business first in order to be like a respectable, personal development expert. And what I wasn't doing what I was doing without realizing is that I was basically saying that I have to, if I want to experience this, which is my real version of happiness and fulfillment, I have to do this first. That's not the way it works. If you want to, for example, I mentioned my public speaking goal. To me, I just have to work on that every day. It doesn't matter the size of the stage. Getting on a podcast is working on that, right? Practice public speaking. I do videos like on an ongoing basis. I write down my ideas, my stories. All of that is a way to work on my lifetime objective directly, nothing in the middle.
Yeah, I like those. That's really, really great. I do think a lot of people get really stuck in societal goals, like what is expected of you. And I think that that's on like all levels. So not even just with like big lifetime goals, but just on all levels. It's like, oh, well, in order to be this person, this is expected of me and I should show up in this way. And I think it's quite a normal thing for us to have that, that built into us. So I think it's a really interesting idea to actually shift the way that you look at your goals and shift them into that lifetime aspect, because I do think for a lot of people when they set goals with a timeline, we as humans are actually really bad with conceptualizing time because it is a made up thing. So we will massively overestimate what we can do in a single day, but we will massively underestimate what we could do in 3 months. It's a proven fact for how people work in relation to time. So I think that actually having lifetime goals where you're taking that dynamic of time out of it is actually a really, really interesting way of setting goals. So I think that that's really, really cool. And then I guess like my last question that I love asking people on the podcast, and I think you've already kind of hinted to this, and we can talk about it a little bit more, is this idea of like your next focus and your next level of healing. So you've said like public speaking is the thing that you're like focusing on at the moment and that you're working towards. And I guess like, has that been a bit of a healing journey for you, being seen and getting on stages and having your story shared? Like, how has that journey been?
You know what? I think that that is such a useful question because I think that I've been feeling. I think that the biggest thing that I needed to overcome in order to pursue my public speaking goal was to stop feeling like an imposter, like a fraud, like I wasn't good enough or qualified to talk about certain subjects. And I don't know exactly. Well, I do know how I did it, but it was a long process, right? So I basically had to become shameless. That's all there is to it. And then also somehow I was able to bring like to find the inside out logic of why it makes no sense to compare yourself with others. So once you dissect that and breaking down and really, really get over it, in my case at least, you just, you know, get on speaking. And there are so many stories that I used to be so embarrassed to talk about. There were so many topics I used to always hide somehow. Like I hated talking about my job. I thought it was embarrassing that I wasn't like a business owner, pro, you know, with all the perks. For me, it was really embarrassing to say that I had failed at so many things. It was super embarrassing to say that I was so clearly like advanced in my personal development, but there were so many things in my life I couldn't change. So to me, that was the biggest shift when I realized that everyone's lives are different, everyone's journey is different, and realistically speaking, like you were saying before, we can't really compare ourselves to other people. Like no matter how much more successful they seem, and it all comes down to how you define success. And I wanted to actually leave you with that. I think it's important. My new definition of success, which interestingly enough makes me successful right now, is that you have to work to be in complete alignment with your objectives, who you are, what your personality is like, and your personal circumstances. So when you take your short-term goals and your daily actions and bring alignment to all of that, you just experience that state in which there is no friction, no pressure to perform, and progress becomes natural, and you actually enjoy the process of it. So that's to me is what success means. And at the end of the day, you just have to find those strategies that work for you, but also bring you small progress on a regular basis.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I think that like I have a sort of a similar idea around defining success and it not being the stereotypical, like I've done the whole climb the corporate ladder, I've done the whole build a super successful business, and I've also done the whole actually walk away and burn it all and like have complete burnout and have complete depression and recover from all of those things. Like I've lived so many versions of what success is meant to be that actually now for me success is not attached to anything other than how I feel. And if I wake up feeling good and being surrounded by the people and the things that I want around me, which are very minimal, I will have you know. Um, and I have access to talk to the people that are important to me and just have like good relationships around me, I'm successful. Like that is it for me. And I think that is like, it's a really, really powerful place to be where you detach from that sort of standard operating procedure of what marketing says success is, because no longer can you be sold to that you need a million things to be successful. Like no longer can you be like tricked into thinking that you have to do more and be busier and, you know, climb more ladders and jump through more hoops. Like I think that that is a really, really amazing place to get to in a healing journey. And I know that for a lot of people who are listening, they might not be there yet, and they might still be in that place of trying to prove their worth to other people and, you know, feeling a lot of shame and a lot of guilt about things that they've done or the life that they've lived. And I think social media particularly creates a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of comparison. And I really just want people to remember that that is a marketing tactic. Like if they make you feel a certain way, they can make you buy a certain thing. And it's your job to not. Like it's your job to be actively aware of what is going through your mind and what is happening and what is possible. And I think that that is a really, really beautiful thing to leave people with around that definition of success, and that it doesn't have to be what everyone else says it is.
No, you really nailed it. I think that the you know the it almost I almost feel like some of the things you add, they just blend so perfectly with what I said before. Like it's really brilliant. Thank you for your additions, for your contributions.
Oh, it's only a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so wonderful to get to know you and to share your story. And I just feel really privileged that you have taken the time to come and speak to myself and my listeners.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of The Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.